On February 13, 2018, Lori Isenberg and her husband, Larry, set sail on Lake Coeur in Idaho. A few hours later, Larry would fall into the icy water. However, as investigators tirelessly looked for Larry's body, they found a sinister truth that was just beginning to come to light. Everyone thought Larry and Lori had the perfect marriage. However, one of them harbored a dark secret that would lead to murder. Lori was born in 1953 and raised in a set of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Her childhood was marked by poverty, with her family occasionally living in abandoned farmhouses. In 1973, at the age of 19, she married Stephen Barnes. They had 6 daughters together before divorcing in 1996. She later moved to Coeur d'Alene as a single mother to raise her daughters. Larry married his first wife in 1974, and together they had 2 children, Jessica and Dean. They divorced when their children had grown up. Soon after, he met Larcene Lori Barnes at the Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce. Larry and Lori got married in 2004 and quickly became pillars of Coeur d'Alene, actively trying to help their community. Larry had retired but remained engaged in various civic organizations, and Lori was the executive director of the North Ohio Housing Coalition, which refurbished buildings for sale or rent to low-income families. Things went swimmingly for the pair, and those who knew them described their relationship as model. On February 13, 2018, tragedy struck when Lori and her husband set sail on Lake Coeur in Idaho. Before departing, Larry sent his daughter a photo of the picturesque sunrise. He also texted one of his friends and told him he was not feeling well enough to fish. However, at 10:25 a.m., the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department received a frantic 911 call from Lori Isenberg. She said Larry had fallen into Lake Coeur while they were out. Lori sounded panicked at the call. She told the operator what happened to her husband. She said Larry was driving the boat, then stood up fast and went to check the motor as he suspected something was wrong with it. When he went to check on it, he fell over into the freezing water. Sheriff's deputies arrived at the scene and sent a rescue boat to look for Lori and bring her back to shore for medical attention. Deputies asked Lori for any information she held about Larry's last known location. She said she didn't know. When asked why she didn't call 911 earlier, she said she couldn't find her phone for 1 to 1.5 hours. She also said that Larry had broken the ignition switch just before the incident, so she had to manually start the engine. Then she said she looked around the area to try to find Larry, but chose not to sail back to shore out of fear of losing track of the location. It wasn't before she retrieved a blanket that she found a phone and called 911. Although the police, at this point, were convinced that it was just a tragic accident, they still had to investigate any foul play. They assisted Lori to an awaiting ambulance for further observation. After that, officers had Isenberg's boat towed to a nearby boat launch for evaluation. Upon investigating the boat, detectives noticed that despite Lori's claims about the ignition switch breaking before Larry fell into the water, officers located a kill switch and lanyard on the floor. The ignition key had been bent, suggesting that there might have been some kind of struggle. The truck that Larry and Lori had used to tow the boat was also searched. Inside, they found an unknown spilled liquid and a bottle of anti-allergy medication. 5 days later, detectives called Lori and asked her to help the rescue team looking for Larry. She agreed, but was of no help to the detectives as she was unable to recall any landmarks. Lori was also acting weird. She would joke around and laugh throughout the search, but then switch and begin to cry for no reason. Then she would abruptly stop crying and continue with the conversation. This behavior struck the investigators as odd. Later that day, the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department received 2 separate calls concerning suspicious activity at Larry and Lori's residence. The callers, 2 neighbors of the Isenbergs, said that Lori was behaving out of character and appeared to have family members helping to move all their belongings out of the house, which Lori explained she planned to sell immediately. These reports piqued the interest of the investigators. On February 21st, the North Idaho Housing Coalition, where Lori worked for years, reported she would no longer be employed due to some fraudulent activity. The coalition accountant discovered some irregularities and ordered an internal audit. As it turned out, Lori had embezzled $579,495 from the North Idaho Housing Coalition in the prior years, according to an investigation. She had access to their bank accounts, had limited control of her operations, and had submitted fake invoices from firms set up in the names of her daughters and with their knowledge. Following this shocking revelation and sensing something was off, Larry's children requested to speak with the investigators about their concerns. Larry's son described Lori's strange behavior in the past few days following Larry's death. The next day, a search warrant was issued for Lori's home for her fraud accusations. The search of their home revealed several disturbing pieces of evidence, including black latex gloves and paper towels with dried blood. They also found a Ziploc bag containing an unknown white powder. The lead detective confronted Lori in her home and told her about their findings. She said the blood on the latex glove and the paper towel was her own. On February 27, 2018, Lori was arrested on 40 counts of forgery and 1 count of grand theft. Her bail was set for $75,000, was posted the following day by one of her daughters. A few days later, police made a horrifying discovery. 16 days after Larry disappeared, police discovered a man's body floating face down near the shoreline of Lake Coeur, 3 miles from where Lori said he fell. The body had no signs of physical trauma, and based on the victim's clothes, they were confident that they had located Larry. The body was sent for autopsy. When the results of the autopsy confirmed the body to be Larry's, however, the examiners also discovered lethal levels of diphenhydramine. Diphenhydramine causes drowsiness even at normal dosage levels, which are typically between 100 and 1,000 nanograms per milliliter. Larry's body contained an astonishing 7,100 nanograms of diphenhydramine at the time of his death. The medical examiners also discovered no signs of drowning, which meant Larry had died before entering the water. Investigators began questioning those close to Larry and Lori, and some cracks started to emerge in their relationship. Some sources claim Larry had made several comments in recent months about Lori's excessive spending habits, especially how much she helped her children financially. Detectives also found handwritten changes to Larry's will a month before his passing. The changes left 80% of Larry's real estate to Lori's children and the remaining 20% to his biological children. After this discovery, the police released Larry's autopsy reports and declared the case a full-fledged homicide investigation. Based on the evidence gathered, Lori became the prime suspect. The investigators speculated that Lori had poisoned Larry by mixing the drug in a bottle of juice found on the boat. After getting dizzy, diphenhydramine overdose, Larry fell into the lake just off the shore from his recovery site. They also believe that Lori intentionally used a trolling motor to drive the boat away before calling 911. The police found out that Lori would become the beneficiary of their estate, which would give her enough money to pay the restitution for her criminal theft. This was a good enough motive to murder Larry. After 2 months on the run, Lori finally turned herself in. The detectives were quick to question Lori for her involvement in Larry's death. They went straight to the point after giving her a rundown of the course of events they were aware of. They asked Lori if she killed Larry or not. They tried to press her into confessing, and they presented all the evidence, but she refused to answer any further questions and asked for an attorney. She was finally arrested 2 years after Larry's death. Lori was charged with first-degree murder in February 2020. She entered an Alford plea to second-degree murder 1 year later. An Alford plea is a guilty plea with no admission of guilt. Instead, you concede to the integrity of the evidence used to convict you. Finally, on May 25, 2021, Lori Isenberg was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum time of 30 years. At her sentencing, Lori Isenberg claimed that she made a poison drink for herself the morning of her husband's murder in an effort to commit suicide. But Larry accidentally drank it while she was dozing on the boat. If that was an attempt to gain mercy, the court was unmoved and gave the 67-year-old a life sentence. Although her present whereabouts remain unknown, with no reports on her conviction getting overturned, we can safely assume that Lori Isenberg is still spending her days behind bars.